Hello everyone, and welcome to the most complete breakdown of Stranger Things The First Shadow Stageplay. For anyone that's been living under a rock, The First Shadow is currently running in New York and London and is a Stranger Things prequel that tells the story of Vecna. Not only does it show us how he got his powers as a child, and the first time humans ever interacted with the Upside Down, but it also tells us how Eleven got her powers. And one of the more surprising things is, it humanizes Henry Creel. He is very much the protagonist of this story that they want you to root for, which is interesting because he's the main villain of the actual show. It intertwines very often with the live action show, and we see what happens leading up to the Creel murders and learn the real reason why he killed his family. We see Joyce, Hopper, and Bob Newby as they are seniors in high school and take an investigative approach to all these mystery murders happening around Hawkins. All three of them interact a lot with Henry all around Hawkins, and it's just a really interesting story considering they're choosing not to film it and put it on Netflix for all the fans to watch before season 5. So this video is for all the fans that don't have the money to fly across the world and pay for hotels and food and tickets to watch the show in person. Of course, if you have the opportunity, I would highly recommend watching the play in London. Shockingly enough, the two plays are completely different. They only started on Broadway earlier this year, whereas they've been putting shows on in London since the end of 2023. And since there was so much time in between, they changed a lot for the Broadway version. While they did add important things to Vecna's lore, tying it into season 5 better, they also decided to shorten it, cutting so many lines from every single scene, and some entire scenes are just completely cut. Watching the Broadway version unfortunately feels like the SparkNotes version of the actual original play. They make huge plot changes, and some of the characters have completely different attitudes in the American version. So what I've done in this video is taken the best version of both. I've included all of the important plot changes from Broadway and break down everything from the current West End version in London. I personally flew out and watched the 7th early screening, a couple rows behind the director, Stephen Daldry, in London before their grand opening, so there's also exclusive things that I saw in person that they cut from both versions. So share this video with all of your Stranger Things friends. I want to see you and all the rest of the Stranger Things community in the comments this one last time before season 5. This will be as condensed as I could possibly make it while hitting all of the important points and including some wholesome interactions I thought you might appreciate. But if you have any questions, please put them in the comments and me or someone else who has seen the play can try to clarify things. Now, the first scene of the play starts in 1943, 16 years before the rest of the play. We learn about a Project Rainbow, which was a secret military mission that used electromagnetic energy to render an entire ship invisible. This mission was a success because for a moment the ship was transported to Dimension X. A Demogorgon appears and kills everybody on the ship except for the captain, who is Brenner's father. The ship returned to the real world, and going to Dimension X changed the captain. It changed his blood type. He told Brenner what really happened before he died, and then Brenner dedicates his entire life to Project Rainbow and joins the team continuing research in Nevada. They eventually uncover a Russian spy in the project who escapes, taking with him a container full of mind flare particles that they extracted from Brenner's father. Apparently, when he was in Dimension X, the mind flare infected him and he brought it back to the real world. A couple days later, the Russian spy was found dead near a cave system. Apparently, Henry Creel was near that cave system at the same time. He found the container and the mind flare particles went inside of him, changing him and his blood type, leaving him with no memory of what happened. Now, we jump forward to October 1st, 1959. Bob Newby has a local radio show that he does. Joyce is dating Lonnie and is running a secret school play in hopes of getting a theater scholarship to leave Hawkins. Hopper is established to have an awful relationship with his father, and we see the Creels moving into their new house. We go into the Newby household and are introduced to Bob's father, Robert, who is the principal of the high school. We also learn that he has a sister, a new character, Patty. Their father obviously does not like her. He marks her tardy for school because she hasn't left home yet and gives her detention for reading a comic book. Patty's not normal. Henry is using his radio to listen to Patty's prayer before school, and Henry says amen, and Patty hears it over the radio. We also learn that Bob is trying to impress Joyce with his radio show, along with kind of everything else he does. At Hawkins High, it's picture day. They use this to introduce Henry to all of the high schoolers that turn into the adults we see on the show. Mike's parents, Ted and Karen, Lucas's parents, Sue and Charles, Dustin's parents, Walt and Claudia, even Eddie's father, Alan Munson. Walt introduces Henry to everybody and then asks Henry about himself, saying that he heard he broke a kid's arm at his last school in Nevada. Henry gets upset and the lights flicker. Walt keeps pressing him, and then the photographer's flashbulb explodes. Patty walks in and defends Henry from Walt bullying him. Walt bullies Patty for not knowing where she's from and says they found her in a dumpster, making fun of the fact she was adopted. Patty helps Henry open his locker and says her mom is the famous singer Ella Fitzgerald. This is the artist that sings the Dream song from the Creel flashback scenes in season 4. Patty and Henry bond over reading the same comic and have a wholesome moment before going off to class. We cut to Joyce at play tryouts, announcing that instead of doing Oklahoma like always, they will be secretly doing Dark of the Moon in hopes of getting that theater scholarship to a college art program. Joyce describes this play as being about a witch boy who falls in love with a human woman and sacrifices his powers in a bargain with the devil so he can be with her, only to doom them both. She says it's a story about the destructive power of fear and asks the question, can love defeat fear? This is basically representative of the first Shadow story and the entirety of Stranger Things to some extent. The themes of love saving you and being much stronger than fear is constant throughout the entire show. Patty ends up trying out for the lead female role. No one wants to read with her, and as Walt starts bullying her again, Henry Creel comes in reading the other lines. They finish the scene together, ending with an awkward moment but displaying obvious chemistry, and Joyce casts both of them as the leads. Later that night, we see the Creel house. Victor and Virginia noticed Henry hanging around Patty and talk about if he should actually be doing that. They think it's too soon since the incident in Nevada where he left a boy in a wheelchair. In Broadway, they changed it to Henry blinded the boy instead of breaking his arm. Henry was listening to their conversation through his radio and he slips into the void. They show this in the play by having these giant red lasers drop down and rise up around the stage. We hear a clock ticking in the background and we see a white wisp zooming around Henry right before we hear a Demogorgon growl. On Broadway, they change it to him seeing Patty and then opening his eyes and she disappears, and this is how he learns how the void works, as if this is his first time understanding it. Then we see Henry listening to Walter, the kid that bullied him at school earlier. Walt is looking for Claudia's cat, which is Dustin's mother. Poor girl has lost so many cats over the years. They find it in the liquor store that Walt's family owns and notice that the cat is scared. The lights flicker. Then they leave the cat to go watch a scary movie. Henry, in the void, walks over to the cat to say hi. He picks it up, saying, "Good kitty, don't be scared," but his voice becomes distorted and it sounds like Vecna's now. The lights go crazy and the sound of static gets louder and louder until Henry lifts the cat into the air with his powers, breaks its bones, and pops out its eyes. Then we see Henry slip out of the void. He notices blood coming from his nose and he thinks it was just a nightmare, and then his mother walks in and tells him, "Come on, they're leaving for church. It's almost 10 a.m. As if after Henry made the kill, he passed out and his mom woke him up 9 hours later. We see the Creel family show up to church and introduce themselves to Mr. Newbie. Claudia rushes in frantic, handing out flyers, offering a $100 reward for anyone that can figure out what killed her cat last night. This, of course, catches the eye of Hopper, who has been needing some cash to fix up his car. Henry sees Claudia and is struggling with himself, trying to figure out if his nightmare was real, and he ends up bumping into Patty. Her dad makes her listen to confessions, so she offers to listen to Henry's. He tells her that he hears voices coming out of his radio and that he has nightmares, ones that he might be able to make come true. Patty asks if he can just make the nightmares happy dreams, since they're his dreams. And he has Patty close her eyes and tells her to sing, and tells her to imagine what she would want her dream to be. He covers her eyes and is able to literally show her her own dream. This turns into a musical number because Patty wanted to sing and dance. On Broadway, they jump forward in the script and she tells them that she wants to find her mom, and Henry shows her her mother singing at her show in Vegas. The entire dream sequence ends with a song, and when they come out of it, Patty tells Henry she'll do the school play if he does it with her, and they both agree. Patty leaves, and Virginia comes around the corner, furious at Henry for talking to another child without adult supervision. She calls the rest of the family to come immediately, and they leave the church. Then we skip forward 1 week to Bob announcing on his radio show that another pet was found dead, bringing the total to 5 dead animals in 9 days. People are starting to wonder what's going on. Hopper walks into Bob's room and has him grab his camera and follow him into the night. Hopper goes and digs up Claudia's cat's dead, mangled body and has Bob take a picture of it. It's here that they discover its eyes are gone and realize it wasn't a lynx doing the killings like some people thought. A person did this. They also realize that all the pets that were killed belong to students who are in the school play, which means it has to be a theater kid who's doing this. And the next day at play rehearsals, Hopper strolls in and starts questioning the cast. Eventually, he gets to Henry and starts asking him questions that make him nervous, and all the lights start flickering. Hopper tells him he's a creepy guy, and Henry runs off to the bathroom, obviously upset. There, he tries to calm himself down, and the lights flicker again, and he sees a nightmare. The mirrors crack, and a smoky reflection appears of himself. Patty walks in looking for him, and since they were doing trust exercises at rehearsal and telling each other secrets, she brings up Henry's secret, the cat, the one that he killed, and the lights start flickering. She says that she knows about all the pets he's been killing, and she says there will be more, that he's going to continue to hurt things and that he will kill, that he's going to kill her. Henry responds saying that he would never hurt her, and Patty says, "We're going to kill a lot of things," as if this is the Mind Flayer speaking to him through this nightmare of Patty. She starts pulling out her hair, and the Mind Flayer tells Henry we can have her. She can be with us. Henry and Patty literally start wrestling back and forth until the lights go out and the nightmare stops. Now, in Broadway, they made it much more intense. After they fight and the lights go out, they come back on to reveal Patty dead on the floor. And a second later, she snaps her head to Henry and says, "Feels good, doesn't it?" tempting Henry with killing her. Henry tries to stop it by offering it more animals. It says that they want the same thing, and then says, "Don't you want to know what Patty's like on the inside? Let me in and I can show you. We can peel her open together." This is way more psychotic and playing into the sociopath vibes way more. The West End had nothing this demented. But after the nightmare ends, the real Patty walks into the bathroom. Henry tries to talk to her but is interrupted by Joyce calling them back to rehearsals to finish the final kiss scene. In this scene in the play, Patty's character is supposed to die, and Patty, reading her lines, says, "I'm scared of dying. Kiss me," which is a little foreshadowing, to be honest. Henry erupts, still emotional from the nightmare, and tells her that if she stays with him, she will die. You can hear his voice slowly distorting and going in and out of sounding like Vecna's. Patty tells him that for the first time in her life, she's finally felt connected to someone, and that she's not going to go anywhere. Henry is really struggling and borderline crying at this point, telling her that he's not normal, and she says that's okay. Why does that have to be wrong? What if this curse you have is a blessing? It's not a mistake, but a miracle. And she tells him that she's not scared. Henry and Patty slowly come together, and she tells him to kiss her. They lean in and have a slow, wholesome, romantic kiss, and all of the lights explode. All the while, Joyce thought they were improvising the scene the entire time and is so ecstatic with their insane chemistry that she says everyone needs to go celebrate at Melvald's diner. In the diner, Henry and Patty are hanging out, and Patty wonders if this is what it's like to be normal, hanging out and having fun just like everybody else. Henry responds by telling her how all these people are actually feeling: nervous, depressed, bored, scared, and Patty asks him how he knows what they're feeling. He tells her that he can hear them in his head all the time. He tells her what she's thinking about her mother, and she asks if he thinks he could find her. They agree to try to find Patty's mother in Henry's attic one night, and even if it doesn't work, it'll just be a date, which is kinda cute. Patty tells Henry that he's a miracle, and then they lean in and share another kiss together. John Melvald sees it and kicks them out for PDA. Then we see Joyce and Bob talking together, and Hopper runs over and interrupts, telling Bob that Alan Munson's dog was killed last night along with Ted Wheeler's hedgehog. For the first time, 2 kills in one night. They fill Joyce in on how they've been tracking the animal killer, and then Bob realizes that the killings happen at the same time that his radio show has been picking up large amounts of static, as if they're related. Joyce considers going to the cops, but decides on joining Bob and Hopper to avoid having her play shut down in case they're related. Then she asks Bob if he can make a homing device to find the source of the interference, and he agrees. Later that night, Bob announces over the radio another 2 pets have been found dead, and we cut to the Creel attic, followed by Vecna's clock chime. Henry walks in, and Virginia is waiting for him. She's mad again and tells him not to see Patty anymore and slaps him in the face. They eventually change the play to have Henry tell her that she can't tell us what to do anymore, and she asks, "Who is us?" She threatens to call the police if he doesn't stop. Henry laughs maniacally and presses her, asking why she never called the police on her father when he would lock her in a closet and all the spiders would come out. This fills us in on where her spider trauma comes from. He makes her see spiders coming out of everywhere in the attic, attic coming for her. On Broadway, Virginia tells Henry to stay away from her, and he says that he's already inside. Can you feel it? The fear? Your fear? It changes us. It feels so, and then he trails off. Henry tells her she's not going to call the police now either because the fear has already taken root and she's too afraid. Virginia tries to run out of the attic and Henry uses his powers to slam the attic door. He seems to become taken over by an entity, and these tan-colored vines come out of the wall and grab him from behind as if this is the Mind Flayer taking over or possessing him. He yells at her and she runs away, saying that she can't help him anymore. She tells Victor and Alice to get their things, that they're leaving. A second later, Alice wanders in and says, "Where's Henry?" Henry, normal now, responds and says, "He's right here." And Alice replies saying that he's not Henry, you're not him. And then Henry tells her to run and she scurries out of the attic. Now, we jump forward to the following night and we see Bob, Joyce, and Hopper together in the woods with the homing device Bob built to track the interference. Hopper puts the pack on his back and they wander off into the night searching for static. Now, since the Creel family left, Henry has Patty over. They go inside and Henry tells her that no matter what happens, try not to let it know you're afraid. We hear Vecna's clock chimes and they head up to the attic. Now, we pause this and go to the town meeting. Hopper's father, the police chief, puts the town under curfew until they find out what's been doing all of these killings. Victor stumbles in drunk and asks to speak with Mr. Newby, telling him Virginia and Alice left this morning and that they're not coming back. Victor tells Newby he thinks the killings might be him with all the nightmares he's been having of the war flashbacks. He tells Mr. Newby that Henry's a good kid and that he's been doing well since he's been hanging out with his daughter. Mr. Newby has no idea about this and is furious. Victor says that they're hanging out at the house now, and they both leave and head to the Creel house. In the attic, Henry blindfolds himself and asks Patty to hold his hand. We see Hopper, Joyce, and Bob in the woods as they start to pick up some static and try to locate the direction it's coming from. Henry's nose starts to bleed and Patty gets concerned, but she hears a female voice singing over the radio and recognizes the song as one her mother used to sing to her as a kid. Henry quickly senses someone else's presence as both of their fathers enter the house. They walk in and the lights start to flicker and static comes over the radio. Then they hear Patty scream from the attic and her father immediately runs up to see what's wrong. But Victor starts rambling and goes into a nightmare from the war. Up in the attic, Patty asks Henry where her mother is and if he can see her. Henry is in the void and finds her mother on stage singing. But something goes wrong. Patty's mother in the void addresses Henry directly and all the lights go red. This very quickly turns into a nightmare. Henry tries to stop it, but he can't. He tries to warn Patty to run as her mother reaches out and grabs onto Henry. Meanwhile, Bob, Joyce, and Hopper are walking through the woods as the machine seems to overload or malfunction from all the static it's picking up. They look up and realize they're at the source, the Creel house. They hear a distorted version of Henry's nightmare coming through Bob's machine, and they decide to go into the house. We go back to the attic, and Patty screams out in pain as Henry's accidentally crushing her hand. Her father runs in, and Henry yells at him to get Patty out of here, to save her. Mr. Newby walks over and tries to force Henry to let go of her hand, and in doing so, swaps places with his daughter. Henry yells out in a distorted voice that he can't have her. She's ours, which is basically the Mind Flayer talking through him. Henry reaches out with his powers and freezes Patty on one side of the attic and throws her father to the other side. Henry levitates up into the air and all the light bulbs explode. Hopper, Joyce, and Bob let themselves into the house and stumble onto Victor Creel still in his nightmare from the war. He mumbles that he killed something, and Joyce assumes he's talking about the animal killings and that they're too late. He's already killed again. They hear Patty yell from the attic, and Bob recognizes her scream and runs upstairs. Henry is now fully suspended in the air with vines connecting to him, but he's still in the real world. Patty pleads with Henry to stop and tries to bring him out of this nightmare. Her father is now trapped up in the air against the wall, restrained by vines. Henry flicks his hand, and we hear Mr. Newby's bones snap as he screams out in pain. Patty tells Henry to make it a happy dream as he throws her father off screen up into the ceiling. Now, for a moment, Henry goes to a happy place, describing the night after they got kicked out of Melvald's diner. It was starting to snow. We see Patty sitting on a bench, and he walks over to her and puts his jacket around her to keep her warm. He tells her that she's perfect, beautiful. And then Henry winces out in pain, obviously struggling to fight off the Mind Flayer. Patty reminds him it's his dream and that anything is possible. She says, "I love you." Henry responds, "Me too." And she responds, "No, you have to say it." And Henry says, "I love you too, Patty." We hear a loud noise interrupt them and Henry falls to the ground as the vines go back into the ceiling. Now, in the Broadway play, they change it so Patty is the one wandering through all of Henry's memories, seeing him get bullied by everyone. And she stumbles onto the memory of the incident from his last school in Nevada. She watches a boy come up to Henry, telling him that he saw him murder his dog, and pushes Henry to the ground. Henry, in defense, throws out his hand, blinding the boy, and then screaming in fear as if he didn't mean to do that. He didn't mean to use his powers. I much prefer the West End's version of them telling each other that they love one another before collapsing, but this was the only time it's ever mentioned what the incident in Nevada was that made them leave, so that's why this is included. Hopper, Joyce, and Bob run in to find Mr. Newby's lifeless body laying on the ground. It seems like Henry, or the Mind Flayer, actually sent him through the floor. They're about to give him CPR when he wakes up screaming, "The boy! You've got to save the boy!" referring to saving Henry from the Mind Flayer. Now, back in the attic, Henry is on his knees trying to gather himself as Patty hysterically runs out the door. We see red lightning strike and then the scene ends. They follow this with a montage that explains that the principal, Mr. Newby, suffered from a terrible fall in quotation marks and that he was blinded. We see a doctor's report say that his eye trauma was not consistent with the reported slip and fall, and a police report shows there's conflicting witness statements. And then it shows us classified documents from Project Rainbow, saying that a possible subject has been found and an investigative unit will be deployed. There was possible exposure to exotic material, referring to Mind Flayer particles, and there is a possible contagion risk. The newspapers then show mystery contractors recommissioning a vacant power plant, referring to them building Hawkins' lab. And then, in the theater, hazmat suits with electromagnetic field detectors wander through the crowd and walk onto the stage. We see Virginia Creel sitting on Henry's bedside, and she tells him about a specialist doctor that she's brought out from Nevada to help him get better. A hazmat suit steps forward and removes his head covering, revealing himself to be Dr. Brenner. He says that he's here to help. The lights flicker and the scene ends, concluding the first half of the play as we hear the Stranger Things intro music. Now, after intermission, we open in Hawkins' lab to Brenner, asking Henry questions about everything. And he mentions Virginia told him that Henry went missing on his 8th birthday for 12 hours near a military base in Lincoln, Nevada, with no memory of what happened. Brenner goes on and starts to taunt Henry, telling him that he's weak and he's not special, intentionally trying to get a rise out of him. Eventually, he gets it, and Henry reaches out in anger and uses his powers to explode the rat in a cage that was in the room with them. Brenner got what he wanted. Then we cut to Hopper and Joyce catching up after the incident as they've been looking into what actually happened, and they just find out that everyone is covering it up with no leads. Disheartened by everything, Hopper randomly asks Joyce if she wants to get out of there. He tells her that he fixed up his car and they can just get in and drive, go to Mexico. Joyce asks him why he didn't leave sooner if his car was fixed, and he tells her that he stayed in hopes of finding this killer to prove to his dad that he's not a screw-up. Joyce tells him that she's been waiting her whole life to hear someone ask her to run away from this place, and she seriously considers it. They exchange a little bit of soft banter, thinking about running away together, and they get closer, and they start to go in for a kiss. But unfortunately, we're interrupted by the receptionist. Joyce snaps back to reality and tells Hopper this is bigger than both of them, and they can't let Victor get away with this. They storm into the police station to talk with Hopper's dad, and Joyce shows him all of her theories and supporting psychological studies suggesting Victor is behind the killings. Hopper's dad just yells at them and belittles them, telling them they need evidence and a confession. The police talk to Patty, and she says her father just fell through the floor, nothing more. Then Hopper and his dad break out into an actual fistfight after some name-calling, and they wrestle through the office, destroying it. Hopper and Joyce eventually leave, determined to get a confession from Victor. The next scene takes place in the hospital, and we see a nurse telling Patty that her father is coming out of the ICU, but he still hasn't woken up. Patty is visibly shaken up and tells Bob that she's scared. What if he comes back for me? The lights flicker, and when Bob asks who, Patty says, "I can't tell you. He's listening," and the lights flicker more. Hopper and Joyce walk in looking for Bob. Patty goes into her father's room to sit by his side as Hopper tells Bob of their plan to take down Victor Creel, and Bob joins them in hopes of protecting Patty. He suggests kidnapping Victor Creel during the play, and Hopper can pretend to be his dad and they'll record him giving a confession. Bob goes into the room to try to convince Patty to do the play again, and Patty thinks he's just trying to get her to do it to impress Joyce, and she gets mad at him and they get into a fight. The commotion wakes up their father, who starts screaming, Bob goes and runs for help, and their dad realizes Patty is there, and he tells her he's sorry. He's sorry for being so horrible to her entire life, and how he thought adopting her would save his marriage, but his wife still left, and because of that, he punished Patty for her entire life. He says that this shadow thing could smell his secret rotting inside of him, and that it attacked him. At first, it went inside of him. He could feel it pulling, hunting, and now he can't stop seeing the shadow monster. The lights flicker and Patty yells out, "Henry, no!" And her father says it wasn't the boy. The boy stopped it. It was killing me, and if the boy hadn't fought it, it would have won. Patty processes what he just said, that Henry didn't do this, as her father removes the bandages over his face and reveals his eyes are gone, leaving behind bloody eye sockets. He asks Patty for paper and shoves his fingers into his eyes and scribbles in blood a picture of the Mind Flayer. This looks just like Will's drawings of it. Alarms go off and nurses run in and he yells, "It wants more. It wants everything. You have to stop it. The boy can save all of us, but he needs your help. You have to find him before it's too late, before he lets it in. It's coming to punish us. I see it. The streets burn. It's everywhere. You're dead. Your mother's dead. We're all dead. I can't serve it. Find the boy. Save him." This ends with Patty seeing the picture of the Mind Flayer he drew, and then we change scenes. In a room at Hawkins' lab, Brenner is taking a syringe full of Henry's blood and tells him they're building a map of his brain and his body. They've also learned already he has a completely unique blood type, one that's never been seen before. Brenner tells Henry the feeling, the rush he feels when he kills an animal, is not psychological, it's physical. When Henry kills, he's actually absorbing the energy from his victim, and it directly makes him stronger. Brenner tells Henry about his father, how he worked on Project Rainbow, and that he was teleported to another dimension. That changed him. When he returned, his blood type was the same as Henry's, unique and different. Brenner was only allowed to see his father once before he died, and he told him the truth about what really happened to their ship. That's when Brenner dedicated his entire life to Project Rainbow, and he joined the research team out in Nevada. Brenner tells Henry that they had access to special materials from beyond our world that were extracted from inside his father. This is referring to the Mind Flayer particles that he infects his hosts with. And 10 months ago, a doctor working on the project with him was revealed to be a Russian spy. This doctor stole these special materials and tried to run away. He didn't get very far, and his remains were found 2 days later near a cave system. When they found the box he took, it was empty. There was no trace of the Mind Flayer particles. But they did find another clue at the scene. A hazmat suit walks in towards Henry holding a box, and in it is one of his toys from the comic books him and Patty read. He lost it one day and never saw it again until now. This means that Henry, as a child, was playing near these caves and discovered the box. He opened it most likely just being curious, and the Mind Flayer particles went inside of him, and Brenner tells him it changed him. Henry went missing that day for 12 hours. They put a brain monitoring device on his head, and Brenner starts pressuring him, asking him what he found in the box. This stresses Henry out to the point where he's convulsing and starts foaming at the mouth. It was enough to unlock this repressed memory he has, just like Brenner does to Elle in Season 4. Through the monitoring device, images appear on the wall of TVs behind him of what he saw that day, and we can clearly see that Henry was transported to Dimension X, and we see images of a Demogorgon attack before all the screens explode and Henry collapses. Brenner tells him that now he has something extra, just like his father had, and now they can open a doorway back to that other place, a gate. This ends the scene, but we need to talk about the massive change they made to this in Broadway. Take this with a big grain of salt. In my headcanon, what we just talked about is what actually happens, but since they updated the American version, this might be important. So in New York, they actually bring out Brenner's father in a wheelchair, still barely alive. He looks just like Terry Ives, kind of non-functioning. Brenner tells Henry the Mind Flayer particles consumed his father's mind, and uses that to say he wants to help Henry. But then out of nowhere, Brenner's father speaks for the first time in years, saying to Henry that they are friends, as if the Mind Flayer is still inside his father. Henry tells Brenner that that isn't his father, meaning it's the Mind Flayer talking. It tells him to let us in, and all of the lights flicker. It tells Henry that in Hawkins he is nothing, but with us, you're a god. He extends his hand and Henry takes it. All of the lights explode and they put the brain monitoring device on his head, and we see the visual of the Mind Flayer form. Brenner leaves his father to admire it right before the wall of TVs explode and break apart, opening a literal portal to the Upside Down on the wall behind them. It seemed like here is when the Mind Flayer goes inside Henry from Brenner's father. We can actually see through the portal Demobats flying around, and a Demogorgon walks up to the portal and shoves his arm through, grabbing Brenner and throwing him to the ground. A scientist runs over and rips the brain monitor off Henry's head, and the portal immediately closes. Brenner's father is dead, and he doesn't seem to care, saying that he was weak, it doesn't matter. And Brenner tells Henry that he's the key. With him, they can open a doorway back to that other place, and whatever comes through, he can help him control. Now, I really don't know why they needed to make such a big change here. We see the Mind Flayer tempting Henry to join him and be a god, and we see a portal open, which is exciting, but it doesn't really serve a purpose other than changing the lore to now being the first time an actual gate was opened between the two dimensions instead of when 11 opened it. But it doesn't make sense why when 11 touched the Demogorgon and opened the portal in Season 1 that it didn't close. If anything, it started coming into Hawkins more, whereas when Henry does it, it closes immediately. In the play, it's almost just used as excitement to fuel Brenner's motivation for research even more. But he already was motivated, so I don't really think this is necessary. Now, moving on, we see Patty in a room talking out loud, telling Henry that she knows he's watching her. We see the lights flicker, and she tells him that now she knows he's scared since her father told her about the shadow, and she knows that she can help him. She puts on a blindfold, and we see Henry bring her into the void. She sees Henry's real body in the lab strapped down to a table, and Henry in the void walks in and greets her, saying that she's not safe here. He tells her they're using him to try to make contact right now since the last experiment. The machines hooked up to him display the image that starts to form the Mind Flayer. Henry begins to tell Patty goodbye and apologizes for everything. But Patty says no, that the scientists can't help him fight the battle inside of him, but she can. Henry says that he's tired. He's tired of hating himself and tired of hating everything, and wonders if he belongs here. Patty tells him that he's not bad, he's just fighting something bad, and she knows he saved her father from it. Henry, in a distorted voice, says maybe he shouldn't have, as if he's been taken over by the Mind Flayer. Henry tells Patty that this thing shows him fears and secrets. And he tells her that her father fell in love with a student and had a baby and declared her mother unfit to hide his secret. He tells her she actually wasn't adopted. This is a minor Broadway change. If you remember earlier when her father wakes up from his coma, he told her he adopted her to save his marriage and it failed. Well, in the American version, they actually change it to saying he fell in love with a high schooler as the principal and then kept the baby and said she was adopted to cover it all up. I kind of just prefer her being adopted as a last resort to save their marriage and it failing, and then because of that, her whole life he resents her. Patty responds to Henry saying that she knows what the shadow is, that it doesn't want or care about him. It's just using him and will continue to until there's nothing left. She says that all of this power is just a drug to keep him distracted while it keeps him alive, meaning that the Mind Flayer is just letting Henry use its powers to justify being a host. She says Henry knows this and that's why he's scared. He tells her that her father lied to her for her entire life and that he hates her and that she's less than nothing. This is all the Mind Flayer just beating Patty down, and it works. She collapses, crying. She tells Henry that she's lonely, and Henry says, "Me too." Patty tells him that she doesn't want to be lonely anymore, and Henry says that she should just run away from him. But she says, where would she go? She's the girl from nowhere. She can't give up. She tells Henry, don't fight for yourself, fight for me. She says that everyone has their monsters, but that doesn't mean they're bad. And if her mom is still out there, she wants to find her. Patty asks Henry to come with her, to leave all of this behind. They'll fight the monsters together and find the good in this world. In the background, the test has been getting crazier up until now, and then the Mind Flayer just disappears. Patty tells Henry to look. It's gone. We're on our own. And Henry replies, it is gone. Don't leave me. Patty tells him that there's a train they can catch tomorrow that goes into the city. They'll tell Joyce that they're going to do the play, and during the chaos, they'll leave before anyone notices. They'll run away together. Henry tells her that he's scared and not to let him go. She says, I won't, and then she disappears. Henry says that he's going to find her. And then Brenner wakes him up, telling him that they weren't able to make a connection, but now he knows how to fix it. He unveils a man with a bag over his head in the other room and explains it's an inmate that has the death penalty and will get the electric chair next week. Brenner tells Henry that the only limit to his powers is access to more fuel, and to test this theory they need more energy. Brenner wants Henry to kill a person to become powerful enough to open a portal. Henry refuses and tells Brenner he's done with the program and that he's leaving. Brenner becomes really upset and starts digging, discovering that there's a girl in his life, and starts taunting Henry again, telling him he'll never live a normal life. He tells him he can't outrun the darkness, he is the shadow, and that eventually he'll come crawling back to him because he wants to kill. The mind games work on Henry, and the lights start to flicker. Blood starts to run from the inmate's eyes from inside the bag. Henry is really struggling as Brenner continues to belittle him. Henry breaks and throws out his hand, lifting Brenner up into the air and sends him through the ceiling as all of the lights go red. The inmate has been killed and has fallen to the ground. Guards rush in and Henry kills them immediately and then runs away, escaping. Now, it's the night of the play, and we see Patty getting into costume, waiting for Henry, but he doesn't show up, and the play starts. Joyce, Hopper, and Bob get Ted to bring the person who is in Victor's seat in the crowd back into the changing rooms. Hopper throws a bag over his head and handcuffs him to the chair, interrogating him, pretending to be his father. But he realizes Ted grabbed Lonnie instead of Victor, and he runs out of the changing room. Now, we hear Vecna's clock chime, and we see the red lasers indicating Henry is going into the void. He listens to Alice asking their mother why Henry's come home, and originally, Virginia says that he's home to have his last supper, as if he's going away forever. She tells Alice that she wants to have a nice family dinner, and then they'll all go see the school play together. And then we see Virginia talking to Brenner, and she's trembling, she's scared. Brenner tells her Henry escaped about an hour ago and asks Virginia about the girl he's going to see. She hesitates and then makes Brenner promise that when they catch Henry, they'll lock him up and throw away the key. That's insane. When she tells him Patty's name, Henry, in the void listening, becomes furious. The scene transforms and goes into the dinner scene that we see from the show. We see Henry interact with this white wisp, this smoke in the void, and then start to struggle. Red clouds appear, and originally, in the background, the mind flare forms in the shadows. But on Broadway, they created a practical 30-foot mind flare that appears above him, which is so cool. We hear the dream song come over the radio, and then we hear screams from Alice, and we hear Virginia's bones crack. A flash of red lightning reveals her in the air crumpled. The white smoke comes down and goes inside of Henry, and then the red lasers take us out of the void. Back at the play, we see Bob tell Joyce Hopper's gone, and that their plan must have worked. He must have taken Victor to the cops. But the final scene of the play is starting, and the power goes out. Joyce has to go down to the electrical room to fix the power, and Henry appears from the shadows, asking where Patty is. Joyce tells him he doesn't need to worry anymore, and that she knows everything, talking about his father being the killer. But of course, Henry thinks she's figured out he's the killer. The lights start to flicker, and Henry gets ready to kill Joyce right before she says that his father will be brought to justice, and Henry stops, confused. He goes on this rant about how he used to just hear voices, but now he sees them, and now he can see everything. We hear Vecna's clock chimes, and the scene ends. And then we see Hopper and his father have a ride at the Creel house to the murders. Hopper's clearly upset and yells at his dad for not listening to him. They tried to tell him about Victor, and then he runs out. We see Henry watching from the void as an officer takes away Victor in handcuffs. A man in a black suit walks in and tells Brenner, who is now on the scene, that they lost Henry. He was unconscious on a gurney, and the next second he was gone. Brenner rushes off, calling all units to the school, knowing Henry's going after Patty. And Henry comes out of the void and goes back to talking to Joyce, telling her that she needs to learn to do whatever it takes to protect what you love. The lights flicker and he asks about Patty. Joyce tells him that she's on the catwalk above the stage getting ready for the final scene, and Henry rushes off. We see Patty up on the catwalk in an outfit of white wings, with Sue clipping her into wires to be lowered down. Sue leaves and Henry rushes up to her and immediately tries to get her unhooked, telling her she needs to leave immediately, trying to send her off to the train station without him, and tells her the address that her mother works at. He says that he needs to make sure that they don't follow them. But Brenner appears with the worst timing ever and starts talking to Patty, trying to turn her against Henry. Brenner tells her that he's a weapon that belongs to the United States government. Patty defends Henry, saying that she's seen him fight the Shadow and win, and Brenner says that he's a killer and that Henry doesn't need her. The lights explode, and Henry is very obviously struggling a lot, and Patty tries to get through to him, telling him not to listen to Brenner. But then Brenner tells her that he killed his family. She refuses to believe it at first, but then Henry says it's true. He tells her that spending time with her made him want to get better, but he can't. She shoves him away from her, and he falls to his knees, and we hear a Demogorgon growl. Brenner says it's here, that the connection is about to start. We see red clouds on the stage form into the mind flare. Henry struggles to tell Patty the Stardust Casino is where she can find her mom, and then screams out in pain. Brenner tells him not to fight it, and Patty interrupts him, telling him to listen to her voice. Stay right here. Brenner tells him she's the only thing holding him back, to take her. Do it. Patty is crying at this point, pleading with Henry, trying to get him to fight back. We hear orchestral music rise up and the lights flash, and we see Henry form the connection with the mind flare. It seems like Henry then reaches out with his powers and pushes Patty away. In slow motion, the catwalk breaks, and we see Patty fall backwards off the rafter down onto the stage below. All the lights go out except for one spotlight on Patty's now lifeless body, and Bob slowly walks over to her crying, and the scene ends. Next, we see a montage of newspapers saying that Patty is in critical condition. We see the newspapers covering the Creel murders, and then one saying that the principal's daughter goes missing, that Patty ran away. And then we see local research study seeks pregnant volunteers, which is Brenner looking for mothers for MKUltra testing, which includes Eleven's mother Terry Ives. And then we see a final newspaper from December 1960 saying Hawkins moves on. A full year has passed since everyone's graduated high school, and we hear Bob's voice come over the radio wishing everyone a Merry Christmas, and now we see Hopper in a police uniform walk into Melvald's to pick up some food to go. He looks up with a warm smile on his face as he listens to Bob on the radio. Joyce walks over, who is now working 2 jobs, one here and one at Enzo's. She's still dating Lonnie, and her and Hopper reconnect as if they haven't seen each other since they graduated. And when Hopper gets up to leave, Joyce shyly tells him that she gets off at midnight if he wants to stick around and get a drink together. And it seems like he really wants to, but he tells her that tomorrow morning he ships off to basic training. He's going to try to make something of himself. And Joyce tells him that he is something. He always has been. And she says that at least they'll always have Mexico, which is really sweet. Hopper stops, and it seems like they're about to go in for a kiss, but Joyce pulls back and they tell each other Merry Christmas and Hopper walks out. Over the radio, we hear Bob dedicate one last song to a special someone wherever she is. And then he plays a song for Patty, one that her mother sings. And this transitions to the stage of a theater, and we see Patty using a cane to slowly make her way to the back after a show. Some showgirls are walking out, and one of them stops and tells her she isn't supposed to be back here. But she does a double take and slowly realizes that this is her daughter. The two run to each other and embrace in a very long-awaited hug, and we see the lights flicker. Patty looks up and says, "Henry?" Her mother takes her hand and they walk off stage together. Now, we see some projected footage, specifically a blueprint of Hawkins' lab that shows Henry's picture at the top and reveals 10 other test subjects below him, each with their own line that connects to Henry. We open in the lab where Brenner has Henry strapped down to a chair with a gag in his mouth. Brenner tells Henry that they've had 10 test subjects successfully survive the blood transfusion so far, and all of them are special, meaning they managed to transfer Henry's powers to each of these children through his blood. Brenner tells him the Department of Defense wants him to dispose of Henry and to get rid of him, but instead he would like him to help him raise the children, to help him get them to their full potential, referring to them as his brothers and sisters. They've unstrapped him at this point and taken the gag off, and Henry agrees. He gets up and we see a small girl playing with a toy on the ground in front of him. It's 11. He kneels down and introduces himself and tells her that he's here to help. He takes her hand and walks away, and then out of nowhere, for a split second, a massive light flashes, showing the 30-foot shadow of Vecna holding young Eleven's hand, and the play just ends. This is such a roller coaster of a show and confirms so many huge theories, answering massive plot questions tying directly into the show. From why Brenner started MKUltra, to the first time humans ever interacted with the Upside Down, to where Henry got his powers from, and completely spins the narrative, showing his human side as we watch him fall in love. We also get to see his internal struggles for the first time as he tries to fight the Mind Flayer. This was the first time that we really get to see the Mind Flayer is truly the one behind all of this, and it's just using Henry. I wouldn't be surprised if we end up seeing Patty make an appearance in Season 5. It would be so crazy to see the kids try to contact what's left of Henry Creel inside Vecna and try to save him from the Mind Flayer. It would be insane to see Henry turn good at the last second and sacrifice himself protecting the kids from the Mind Flayer, just like Billy did in Season 3. I also really like that just like Will, Henry also was able to act somewhat normal with the Mind Flayer inside of him until it needed him to use him, and then we heard his voice turn into Vecna's. Because Will talks about this in Season 3 when Billy is the host, that the Mind Flayer is dormant inside of you until it needs to use you and then you're activated. It's so cool to see the Mind Flayer speaking through the nightmares and the people he infects. This play is truly amazing. If you're ever in London and it's still running, it's 100% worth it. Please go watch it in person. I think I teared up multiple times watching it. The one in New York is better than nothing, but trust me when I say it's completely different. It feels so rushed with them cutting out so many amazing parts from the original show and changing some of the main characters to be insufferable and annoying. The effects are awesome, but the ones in the West End are really good too. I hope you enjoyed this very thorough breakdown of every important story element as well as some of the more wholesome, emotional beats. Please send this to all your Stranger Things friends so they can join in on our conversation and tell me in the comments what you thought of all these massive reveals. Thank you so much for watching this video. I will see you in the next one. Peace.